Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. First of all, to all the viewers of Dev Talk, a very, very happy new year from my side. And God bless all of us sitting in India and all over the world with health and happiness in this coming new year of 2023. I've got an interesting subject to start off the new year: Pakistan's biggest fault line, at least not recognized till now, which is going to be discussed by a renowned author, Mr. Tilak Devasher, who's written a book, by the way. It's a mind boggling book, if I may. Sir, thank you so much. He's also the member of the National Security Advisory Board. The book's name is Pashtuns, A Contested History. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me on this great new year and explaining to us what's the biggest fault line in Pakistan amongst the Pashtuns.
Thank you so much, Aadi. Thank you so much, and wish you a very happy New Year and all your viewers and through the show. A very happy, prosperous, healthy New Year for everybody, and may peace prevail.
I hope so, sir. Sir, this is an in-depth sort of a discussion about Pakistan where we will actually kind of get into the threadbare of the means and being of Pakistan. Now, you've written this book. The biggest question that I wanted to ask you is why, sir? Why the Pashtuns?
Yeah,
Yes,
a whole lot. Yeah,
beautiful, and I must say
yeah. I know they're a fantastic production job. Yeah,
the cover is mind-boggling, and especially the guy in the center with the gun on the back and the eyes that he shows. It's so typical of the current feeling. So why this book, sir? Why did you write this?
so first thing about the cover, a lot of people said, "Why are you showing Pashtuns with weapons there?" So actually, it is a yearning for peace. If you look at this man carefully, but prepared to defend himself, ready for anything. But it's a yearning for peace, and therefore the weapon is rested. It's not pointing aggressively. You see, for first, just a little bit about the book before I come to why I wrote this. This is my fourth book, and talks about the Pashtun ethnic ethnicity group straddling Afghanistan and Pakistan. And though no sort of discussion about a people can be divorced from the countries in which they live, this book is not about Pakistan. It's not about Afghanistan in the main. It is about the Pashtuns. This is their story. Now, the reason why I wrote it is because Pashtuns matter, and they matter vitally. Understanding of the key impulses, the religious impulses, the Pashtunwali, the code of the Pashtuns, and especially of two main the sort of characteristics in the Pashtuns, Pashtun extremism and Pashtun nationalism, and a potential combination is vital for peace and stability in the area. Misunderstanding of these forces and wrong prescriptions in the past have led to instability in this vital crossroads, as it were, which has then radiated instability in the entire region, leading to refugees, leading to drugs, providing open spaces for international terrorism to incubate. Therefore, this understanding is very important. Similarly, people ask, why have you written about the people rather than the countries? And the answer to that is, the Pashtuns, they straddle an area of 100,000 square miles, and traditionally, their land has stretched from the Indus to the Hindu Kush. Today, this land is divided between Pakistan and Afghanistan because of the artificial Durand Line. So, despite being the largest Muslim tribal population in the world, the Pashtuns are without a state of their own. But despite this division, the Pashtuns share a common ideology of descent, a common religion, common ethnic, cultural, linguistic, familial bonds, a common code, and common historical memories, which makes it easy to see them as a common ethnicity inhabiting a single piece of real estate. Moreover, the present division of the Pashtun lands is just one of the avatars that this land has suffered or land has had to go through over the centuries. The fact of this commonality, this unifying force among the Pashtuns is best expressed in a Pashto phrase, Larobar Yo Afghan, which means the Afghans in the low as the lowlands of Pakistan, and the highlands of Afghanistan are one. So they have this feeling of commonness and unity, despite being divided into two countries. So that sort of briefly tells you why I wrote the book and Why about the people rather than about the countries?
I think it's the people that make the land more than anything else.
Yeah, but
That's
traditional IR practices are that you talk about countries in geographical borders, the Westphalian model of countries rather than the people. But here I thought there are two countries but one people. So let me write about the people instead of the countries.
I think you brought that out very interestingly, sir, because the entire game of Pashtuns is the people divided, and that's the whole fight today. So before we get into that, sir, I want to talk about the land, the history, the geography. Geography being the most important, of course. It is said that these guys have been at war, and when we read British history, we also realize that the Britishers were kind of attacking them all the time. They used the primitive air power straight after the First World War to control this area right up till the late 40s and stuff like that. How would you kind of describe it as you've done in your books? The land, the geography, and how is it relevant?
You see, the geography has been a critical part in this area. It has been both been a strength and a weakness. A
Hmm.
weakness because it lay on the land route to the riches of India. So every invader had to go through Pashtunistan to come into India. It has been a strength because of the mountainous terrain. It has bred a very robust people who have managed to challenge each and every invader. In fact, the terrain is so tough that some of the names in that area, you have names like Dozakh Tangi, that means the gorge of hell, and you have something called Giddar Khulla, the mouth of the jackal. And in fact, the terrain has been described as a fortress built by nature for itself, for herself. A fortress built by nature for herself. So you can imagine the kind of terrain, which you're dealing with. And the other thing which you asked was about the constant warfare and the
Yes, yes, sir.
invasion. You see, if you see throughout history, this land has had more invasions than any other in the world. Right from the Persians, the Greeks, the Sakas, the Kushans, the Arabs, the Turks, the Mongols, the Mughals, the British, the Soviets, the Americans. This has seen it all over the centuries. And therefore these invasions have bred a very tough people who have a unique way of looking at the world and a unique way of living. In the Middle Ages, it was divided between three great empires. The Mughals in India, the Safavids in Persia, and the Uzbeks. For two
Hmm.
centuries, it was contested between these three empires. In the last 2 centuries, it has had the unfortunate distinction of being invaded by the main powers of the time, the British in the 19th century, in the Great Game between the Soviets and the British Empire, the Soviet Union in the 20th century when it became a pawn in the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, and in the 21st century on the War of Terror. So one after the other, this land has not seen peace. In fact, in the last 40 years, constant warfare has led to one of the largest migrations in recent times. And most of them have been Pashtuns, whether they were refugees in Pakistan, they were refugees in Iran, or internally displaced people in Pakistan itself. They've also been the biggest sufferers in the globalization of jihad because the traditional Pashtun structures, the tribal structure, the Maliks, they have all been destroyed and replaced by radical Islamists, both Afghan and Pashtun. They've also suffered the most violence. The people killing are Pashtuns. Those whom they are killing are also Pashtuns. The
Hmm.
Mujahideens were 6 out of 7 Mujahideen parties were Pashtun. The Taliban is Pashtun. The Tehrik-e-Taliban is Pashtun. Those who they are killing in Afghanistan and Pakistan are also Pashtun. Even Pashtun children have not been spared. So, this is a real tragedy. And we only think in terms of violence and terrorism emanating from the Pashtuns. But, just step back in time and see the kind of history and what kind of violence they've had to face over the last 40 years and throughout the centuries.
It seems like they had it in for them, if, in a very, very crude way of speaking. But you mentioned the you mentioned the people, and the people are, of course, have this code amongst themselves where they kind of keep them connected to their history. and keep them connecting themselves connected to their traditions, which are held in very high esteem in that region. Of course, the leader and the, the family, and these are the codes which are there. Of course, I'd really like to just help us understand what's the baseline of this code, sir. Of course, we know the name, the Pashtun Wali, but what's the baseline? What's the origin of this code? What does this code? What is the main features of this code, and how does this impact the being, the religion, and the interaction with this group, sir?
You see, Pashtunwali is a unwritten set of values, customs, and beliefs that are known and followed by Pashtuns, all the Pashtuns. And everybody knows what Pashtunwali is because even if it is not sort of written down anywhere. Now, it is a code which sort of demands or which establishes a way of life for a Gairatmand Pashtun, an honorable Pashtun who lives his life as per the norms of Pashtunwali. At its core, it is about honor, or Nang, as it is called in Pashto. You know, based on the triangle of Zan, Zar, Zameen, which is
Mhm.
women, wealth, and land. This is the three values, the honor, which is the critical of that. And because individuals have to defend their honor and the honor of the tribe, most Pashtuns will carry weapons, not as offense, but as defend their honor and the honor of the tribe. So it is almost like a jewelry. You only have people like the Khudai Khidmat Guards of Ghaffar Khan or the Awami National Party who have shunned violence as a matter of principle and will not carry weapons. But most of the others will carry weapons as to defend, their honor and the honor of the tribe. The key element of Pashtunwali is badal or revenge. That is something which has led to generations of blood feuds between tribes, between individuals. Every Pashtun knows that if he dishonors another Pashtun, revenge will not be long in coming. There will be revenge whenever it does come. As the saying goes, that he is not a Pashtun who does not give a blow for a pinch. So no injury is left unpunished and no debt is left unpaid. And again, time is not really a factor. As the one Pashtun who said that he took revenge after 100 years and he took it too soon. So this festers, this feeling goes down, pushed, it goes down generations until the revenge is actually taken. In fact, Ghaffar Khan's son, Ghari Khan, he put it best when he said, if dishonored, a Pashtun has no option but to shoot. So he will either kill or get killed if he has to protect his honor. And here the laws of the land don't really matter. Because for a Pashtun, the sense of justice is to seek revenge for any dishonor. If it goes against the law of the land, well, too bad. He has to take his revenge. The other elements of Pashtun Wali are things like Melmastia, which is hospitality, and Nanamati, refuge. Hospitality even at times will triumph revenge. When your most deadly enemy seeks refuge with you, you cannot deny him hospitality. The person will have to feed his bitterest enemy, look after him, provide him safe passage from his territory, and then maybe kill him. But so long as he's with him, he has to look after him and provide him hospitality and provide him refuge. Now, this is the kind of concept which is totally alien to a Western mind. So when the British came across this, and they found, they just couldn't understand that how is this possible? So to the logical mind, Pashtunwali just does not make sense. That's the reason why it is so important to understand the impulses of the Pashtuns if you're going to deal with them and to establish peace in that area. Look at Mullah Omar. After, when Osama bin Laden and was an international terrorist, the Americans wanted him, and Mullah Omar said, I won't. Clerics from Saudi Arabia and from Egypt also told him that, look, even as per Sharia, you should hand him over to a Muslim country to stand trial for his deeds. He said, sorry, as per Pashtun Wali, he sought refuge with me. I will not hand him over. Even if I lose my sort of power or whatever it is, I cannot go against the grain of Pashtun Wali, which is that I've given him refuge. So that is where even Pashtun Wali triumphs over Sharia. even though they are supposed to be sort of great votaries of Islam and all that. But when it comes to issues like these, you'll find that Pashtun Wali. So there is a lot of similarity. They work in tandem, Islam and Pashtun Wali. But there are times when it contradicts. And there, more often than not, people would prefer Pashtun Wali rather than Islam.
That's interesting. So, just a sub question to what you said, and there are two parts of it which kind of interested me. One is the women. You mentioned this, and a lot of people will say, "Yeah, what respect to women and this and that." They will look what they're doing in their country, the Taliban and stuff like that. So, how do you kind of correlate that? One, and two, you said badal, which it might be a wild thought, but 20 years of the American war in Afghanistan would require some sort of a badal.
Not only that, I mean, even before that, the 70 years of what Pakistan has done to them is going to, retribution is going to come. Retribution, if I were, especially a Punjabi in Pakistan, I would be very scared. Retribution may come not today, may come tomorrow when they are stronger, but it will certainly come.
Hmm.
So, yes, no injury or no insult is going to be forgotten.
I mean,
They'll pay them back. Time
that's
is
a
not
very
important.
time is not important. And with recent events, and you see the Americans starting to get not re-engaged, but re-speaking, re-involved in that region in terms of its safety, security. No, no, we'll help Pakistan and this and that. I just have this weird notion that are they being pulled again within into this whole fold?
You see, after August 21, the Americans didn't want to have anything to do with Afghanistan anymore. As somebody put it, Afghanistan is now in the rearview mirror. The further you get away from it, the better it is. But you're right. The key US interest will remain terrorism, and especially both for Al Qaeda and the Islamic State, ISKP, Islamic State Khorasan Province. And it was hoped that the Taliban will take care of the Islamic State and not allow Al Qaeda any space for international terrorism. But Taliban have not been able to actually deal effectively with the ISKP. And therefore, you will find that ISKP has carried out many bombing missions. In fact, even when the Americans were leaving at Kabul airport, that big explosion. So, I don't know whether the Americans, but they're certainly looking at it a bit more carefully. And the reason for that is suddenly the TTP, the attacks of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan have become much more pronounced in Pakistan itself. And what Pakistan had hoped that the Taliban would achieve for them has not come to fruition. The most important thing was that they will recognize the Durand Line. The Taliban have not accepted the Durand Line. Not only have not recognized the Durand Line, they have uprooted parts of the fence. And they have told Pakistan categorically that this is an unresolved issue. It divides brothers. We cannot accept it. And if you have time later on in the program, I'll tell you why. No Afghan government will accept the Durand Line. And no one has in the past, and unlikely in the future too. So then you talked about women. That's a very important,
Yes.
very important issue. You see, Pashtun society is being conservative.
Mhm.
For them, if they are to breed fighters, the women need to be protected. And as somebody wrote, that there is no other woman in the world which is as much protected as the Pashtun woman. So they're very jealously guarded because they are the mothers of tomorrow's fighters. But that's one way of looking at it. The other way is that they are cloistered. They are not, no man can dare look upon a Pashtun woman who is not his wife. If he does, the other person will consider it as dishonor and will lead to a blood feud immediately.
Wow.
So the women have been, in the modern concept, the women have been actually suppressed and kept in very closed quarters and closed confines. They're not, party to any decision making and, things like that. But what the Taliban have done is actually gynophobia, the fear of the woman. That even if you see her ankle or if you see her face, it is straight out of hell or something like that. Now, this is not Pashtun culture. It is not as per Pashtun Wali. It is not. So, this is a strange kind of thing, philosophy, which Taliban have developed. You see, you've had, for example, Amanullah Khan, who succeeded Amir Abdul Rahman in 1901. He tried to liberalize women. He said you don't have to wear a burqa. There was a reaction against it because it was a conservative society.
Hmm.
Under Daud and under the communists, under Najib, women were voluntarily asked. If you saw the photographs of the 60s and 70s of Kabul, you'll find extremely well dressed and modern women. So it's not a Pashtun thing. It is the Taliban own philosophy. And I think, I don't know, it's a maybe they're trying to just draw attention to themselves to make sure that people, because they hold women hostage, 50% of the population is not working, is not allowed education. The international community can't allow this to go on indefinitely. So this is the way they think that they can engage the international community and gradually give concessions so long as they get aid and things like that.
Come on. They're smart guys. They're not fools, is what we think of them.
Not at all.
Yeah. A lot of people say, "Hey, gadhe hain yaar, kuch nahi kar sakte," and all
Ah,
that stuff.
that's the biggest misunderstanding you can make of a Pashtun. He's a very, very smart person.
Very smart. As a matter of fact, you mentioned also something gynophobia, which is interesting because it also relates with the recent movement, anti-hijab movement within Iran.
Yeah.
It could be that they're just saying, "Yeah, tum log andar jao, boss. We can't deal with this right now in our country." You never know. I mean,
On the
this just
contrary, you see, on the contrary, I'm sure they realize that one of the principal points of getting recognized by the international community
Mhm.
was treatment of women. Allowing girls to go to school. It began with that, allowing to higher education, allowing women to work, though they constricted the area where they could work. And they knew this, that recognition will depend on this. No country is going to recognize them if they continue to discriminate so much against women. It's not going to happen.
Let's hit the Durand lines, the bone stuck in Pakistan and Afghanistan's neck, if I may. Uh, the background of this line is interesting. It was, like just like any other border within the Indian subcontinent, it was probably drawn without consent or whatever the case was at that time. You mentioned here that no government in Afghanistan would ever recognize this. Now, the interesting
So,
part is that Pakistanis tried to do that in '96 with the previous Taliban regime, and they brought these guys back thinking that it'll happen again. Help us understand this, sir.
yeah. You see, unlike other borders of India, the 1893 Durand Line did not demarcate borders. It demarcated spheres of influence, and the Amir signed on the agreement. Right? He signed on. It wasn't against. But the interesting thing is the British, again, typical British trickery. The Amir could not read a word of English, couldn't understand English. So Durand agreed because he knew Farsi. He knew the Dari, as they call it, in that the agreement will be in Dari and that will be the accepted text. Yet he did make the Amir sign the English text, which the Amir could not know what he was signing up on. And he didn't sign the map. So it was controversial to begin with itself. And right from 1893 till 1947, the British accepted that the Durand Line earmarked spheres of influence, which was a concept in the colonial era, spheres of influence without exchange of sovereignty. Knows that the Amir's sovereignty would continue, but this would be the British sphere of influence in which the Amir would not interfere henceforth. But in 1947, when India was being partitioned, the military chiefs of staff, British chiefs of staff, said that the most vital part of the subcontinent was the area of Pakistan, because there they could tackle the Soviet Union after the Second World War, which became hostile, and protect the wells of power, the oil of the Middle East. Therefore, they needed to strengthen Pakistan. And if Pakistan was to be strengthened, then the portion of the which was demarcated by the Durand Line had to become a border. And that's also the reason why in NWFP, unlike all the other assemblies where the assemblies voted for accession to India or to Pakistan, in NWFP, a special device of a referendum was instituted, even though the Khudai Khidmatgar Congress government had won the elections in 46. In 47, a referendum was held to determine whether it would accede to India or to Pakistan, NWFP. So it was strengthening. Similarly, in Balochistan, the Khan of Kalat, the British literally forced Jinnah to ask the Khan to sign on the dotted line, because again to bolster and make Pakistan complete, and so that they could then leverage Pakistan's geographical position against the Soviet Union and to protect that. So this is what happened. Now, there are two issues, major issues with the Durand Line. One, that could an agreement signed between the British and the Afghans be passed on to Pakistan, which was created only in 1947. There's a legal background to this. The second issue was the agreement in perpetuity? If it was in perpetuity, then it would have been mentioned in the agreement itself. It was not. And most important, the last agreement between British, India and Afghanistan was the 1921 Anglo-Afghan Frontier Agreement. Now, this agreement was only for 3 years, and by giving 12 months notice, either of the two sides could rescind the agreement. Now, when Pakistan was created in 47, they did not either, sort of revalidate these agreements or come to a new agreement with Afghanistan. In 1949, because of the air raids, which Pakistan carried out some air raids over the border areas, the Afghan government called a Loya Jirga in 1949, and they rescinded all agreements with Pakistan, including the 1879 Gandamak Treaty, the 1893 Durand Line Agreement, the 1905 Agreement, the 1919, and the 1921 Agreement. So, as far as the Afghans are concerned, there is no Durand Line, there is no demarcated border with Pakistan. And since 49 till 2022, no Afghan government, whether it was Dawood, whether it was Zahir Shah, whether it was the PDPA, whether it is Hamid Karzai, whether it is Ghani or Taliban in the 1990s or Taliban now, have said, no, we don't recognize it. Pakistan has tried very hard, as you mentioned, to get it to recognize. They said no. And Pakistan realizes the weakness of their argument and of their border. Therefore, as a stronger power, they say this is the boundary. If the weaker power doesn't accept it, too bad, that's their problem, not mine. Yet Pakistan keeps insisting on every government, Afghan government, to agree to the Durand Line. And they will not accept it because a Loya Jirga, duly called, has rescinded. So there is no border. So that is the reason why it is so important. And that also accounts for Pakistan's entire Afghan policy since 1949. 1947, in fact, when the whole Pashtunistan issue actually came up, they are worried that one day these territories, if Afghanistan is strong, therefore they need to have a weak and a friendly government dependent on Pakistan in Kabul. If there is a strong government in Kabul, they will ask for these areas back. And Pakistan stands to lose a major chunk of its territory. Now, whether it happens or not, I don't know. But at least it's a threat. It's a fear that Pakistan has.
So that's interesting. So you've kind of given us a background of the region. Now I want to talk within Pakistan, the Pashtuns within Pakistan, because the reorganization of their lands is something that comes up every time, which is the Pashtuns are spoken about within Pakistan, FATA and this and that, FATA, SWAT, and that's the bone of contention. And what has been the impact of this reorganization done by the Pakistani authorities of that land, sir?
You see, FATA was a black hole. The erstwhile federally administered tribal, 7 agencies.
Yes, sir.
The British kept it as a black hole, and they had this frontier crimes regulation. But the political agent was the boss of the agency, he was the judiciary, he was the legislature, he was the executive. There was no appeal to his decision. He could send you off to the Andamans, and there's no appeal. Pakistan kept it as a black hole for the last 70 years. And then after the Peshawar APS school massacre, they decided that, they have to do something about this area. So there were different views on what should be done with FATA. Should it be merged with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa? Should it become a separate province? Or should it be left itself but change the frontier crimes revolution, allow political parties to function in that area. So ultimately, the decision was taken that they will merge the tribal districts with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but invest a large sum of money to bring the tribal districts up to the same level as the so-called settled districts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Health, education, building of roads, and so on and so forth. Now, what has happened is that they have not invested the money because they didn't have the money to do so.
Hmm.
So this area continues to be in limbo. And then you had the army operations, where about 1.5 to 2 million people, especially from Waziristan, North and South Waziristan, became internally displaced people, and spread out in different camps in major cities of Pakistan. So neither was the development taking place. They became IDPs because of the army operations. It was a double whammy. And this is the circumstances in which the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement took birth. And, that the non-violent sort of movement came. So today, there is unrest in these areas again because you have the TTP has come back into its own. The TTP managed it had splintered, but the new Amir, Noor Wali Masood, managed to bring the splintered groups together in 2000. And then in 2001, when the Taliban took over Kabul, they released a large number of prisoners. So the TTP has really been strengthened and they have started their operations. There have been a 50% spike in violence inflicted by the TTP in centers. In fact, even they struck at the Chinese who were building a dam in Gilgit-Baltistan. They have also tied up with one group in Balochistan and they're attacking the Pakistan army there. So gradually the tentacles of the TTP are spreading out. Now, as I mentioned, the terrain. You see, the Pakistan army, the problem is that bulk of it is Punjabi. And they're using the frontier corps. The frontier corps is the Pashtuns. Now, those Pashtun soldiers know that if they kill another Pashtun, they will have to fare generational feuds because of Badal. So there is a bit of a hesitancy. The Punjabi does not know the language. And then because of tribal rivalries within the Pashtun areas, if, for example, there is a Masood guide who's translating for them, he will try and fix his rivalry with the Wazirs. So there have been cases like that where they're trying to, the intertribal rivalry is sorted because the Punjabi doesn't understand. So there are many complications. That's one of the reasons why Pakistan is facing a tough time in dealing with the TTP. And then besides, this is their home, this is their terrain. They lived on the mountains, they've been born there. And Pakistan army is a conventional army. It is not an anti-insurgency army.
Yeah.
That's the other problem that they have in dealing with them. So ultimately, they will, like they did, when this Zarb-e-Azb operation was held. The problems actually started with Musharraf when he went in without any preparation, and instead of dealing with a political agent who knew these people, the brigadier or the major sahab went and talked to the tribes. He knew nothing of their customs. He didn't know Pashtun, but he didn't know what it was all about. And then revenge killings started. And then you have the Lal Masjid episode when the TTP was actually born. Yeah. So now, it's like you've disturbed a beehive. And those bees are buzzing and they are really going to come back and bite. So it will require a lot of tact and statesmanship. I'm not sure that the Pakistan army has. See, somebody said it beautifully, that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. A Pakistan army, whether it was in East Pakistan, whether it is in Balochistan, or whether here it is in the Pashtun areas, they just go in with all guns blazing. Think that is the way to put down a people. No, you cannot do that. You couldn't do it in Bangladesh. They may have killed 2 million people, but they couldn't do it. And that was far away. Here it is your backyard. You have Pashtun generals, you have Pashtun soldiers. Karachi is the largest Pashtun city.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for Pakistan to tackle this. They have to tackle it very sensitively. I'm not sure whether they have the capacity to do so.
That's interesting. That also brings the thought to mind that the Pashtuns today have strategic depth in terms of their operations against the Pakistani army. So it's not something one-sided.
In fact, the strategic depth is working in reverse. Instead of Pakistan seeking a strategic depth, it's the Taliban who got strategic depth in Pakistan.
So, but the the demand for a separate state, although it's very nascent because the current leaders say no, 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 we want to be within the this thing, humko hamara jagah de do types. But the demand, if there is any, for a separate Pashtun state carving out that particular region, the Pashtunistan. Interesting. There's it's also interesting that the Pakistanis did not name that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa just on Pakhtun. It was just Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They wanted to bring that bloody twist inside, so it's not purely Pakhtun. Uh, but economically and socially, is it even viable? Does the low population, as you said, the Pakistanis not aware of the Pashtun codes. What about the rest of the world? Is it really viable for them to go towards that particular direction?
You see, it's certainly a critical mass of population. There were
Mm.
31 million Pashtuns in Pakistan. There are another 15 million in Afghanistan. So it's a critical mass of population,
Yeah.
very much like what East Pakistan was. And not unlike the Baloch. The Baloch are only 5 million. They don't
Yeah.
have a critical mass of population. The Pashtuns are definitely a critical mass. They have enough resources. But the point is not that. The point is, it's a very complex issue. You have Afghan nationalism, you have Pakistani nationalism, both coming out from a single Pashtun tribalism. But they have developed differently over the last 70 years.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan, the Pashtuns have been the ruling ethnic group for the last 200 years, more than 200 years. They're not a majority, but they're the largest ethnic group. In Pakistan, the Pashtuns come after the Punjabis and the Sindhis. They're nowhere near being the elite, as it were, the dominant ethnic group.
Mm.
The Pashtuns are far more in the settled areas, far more well developed economically in terms of living standards than the Pashtuns in either the ex-FATA or in Afghanistan. So there are these pulls are there. Yet the feeling of common, language, common culture, common familial bonds, common descent, common is still there. So you have both features, pull and push. Both are there. A lot is going to depend on how Pakistan deals with it and what are the objective conditions in Pakistan itself. I mean, if you read Pakistan today, the way the economy is going downhill, that soon they're running out of, the immediate issues of their foreign exchange reserves are low. They're running out of food. There's a shortage of wheat and atta. Things could change. There could be a black swan event. I can't predict. We cannot predict what the future is. But
Mm.
the fact is, they have a critical mass. They have enough commonality, and economically, they have enough resources too. But there is no common vision, whether it is from the Pashtuns in Afghanistan or in Pakistan. Are they talking about a greater Afghanistan where the Pashtun areas merge with Afghanistan? Are they talking about a greater Pashtunistan where the Pashtun areas in the two countries merge? Or are they talking about a autonomous Pashtunistan within Pakistan by merging all the Pashtun areas? North Baluchistan is actually all Pashtun areas. Quetta and
Mm.
north of it is all Pashtun areas. So there is no common vision. So as I say in my book, a lot the Pashtun intellectual will have to articulate a vision of what they want, what they desire, what the road ahead is, which then Pashtun politicians, by sitting across the table, will have to hammer out some sort of a policy and the way forward. So it's not a complex issue. I mean, it's a very complex issue. There are no easy answers.
Guys, before I get into a couple of questions that I will choose from the audience, I have two more short, very little questions. One, uh, the Pashtun, you mentioned that the leaders of the Pashtuns need to come up with something to talk about. And I personally find that uh, there is no leadership of the Pashtuns. There's no guys who are coming up and saying, this is our story. So, is there a lack of communication from their side across the world to kind of understand what their game is?
Yes and no. You see, you'll be surprised. The Taliban had an extremely effective communication strategy in the 20 years when they were in insurgency. In fact, the head of the NATO Security Forces, General uh, David Richards, is on record saying he's never seen a more sophisticated propaganda machinery than that of the Taliban. And the sort of the climax of that was the article that Sirajuddin Haqqani managed to get published in the New York Times, saying that they were a moderate force, they will have an inclusive government, women will be allowed to work. Now, this is all a hoax. Yet they were able to convince large sections in the West that the Taliban had changed and become a moderate force. A brilliant communication strategy. Now, today, the Pakistani Pashtuns have outsourced their communication strategy to the state of Pakistan. It is Pakistan who's talking about them. They're not talking about themselves because if they do, they'll immediately be branded as traitors and so on and so forth.
Mm.
The Taliban today, after they've come into power, after having become insurgency, become a government, they're too bogged down in governance issues rather than in developing a communication strategy and what they want for the future because they're on the back foot. They're in a very weak position. And the last thing they want to do is to antagonize Pakistan on this issue. They're okay antagonizing Pakistan on the Durand Line issue. But on this issue that they want looking for to regain their territories up to Attak, they rather not do it at this stage. So therefore, I think the Pashtun cause is falling by the wayside because neither the Pashtuns in Pakistan nor the Pashtuns in Afghanistan can articulate the vision just yet.
A final word on China, sir. How do Chinese influence kind of play around with the Pashtun nationalism, if I may, in this particular region, sir?
See, I think China has two interests in among the Pashtun: security and economic. They are concerned and worried about the Uyghurs getting trained with the Taliban, with the ISKP, even with Al Qaeda, and coming back to Xinjiang and creating more trouble for them. So they would rather block them in Pakistan or in Afghanistan itself. So there's a security issue. The second is economic. That they have got interest in this copper mine, this Heineck, and it is felt that Afghanistan has a lot of rare metals, lithium, uranium, and things like that, and they can go and mine them. You know, the Americans were there for 20 years. They couldn't mine a single ore because to do that, you need basically security. Nobody is going to come and invest billions of dollars to building a road, mining it, building equipment, unless there is security. I think the Chinese are pretty smart too. They may talk about this to create a scare that, oh, we are going to take away whatever lithium is there in Afghanistan. I don't think so. It's going to be very easy, but they certainly have an economic interest. So I think these are the two things that the Chinese will be looking for. You see, China has become frustrated with Pakistan because they find Pakistan is not able to repay their loans or carry out its part of the bargain for CPEC. Where is Afghanistan going to do it? They are stuck with Pakistan. They don't want to be doing the heavy lifting for Afghanistan too, right? So it's good to talk about it for the Chinese to create a scare and things like that. But I think they will be looking at the security interests and economic interests only after there is some kind of stability in Afghanistan.
That's a very important point. One must understand, the whole propaganda machine of the Chinese. Oh, $3 trillion worth of deposits and this and that and the other. And it becomes news headlines that, oh, Chinese are already in Afghanistan, they've got this and that and the other. But there's a whole lot of background to it, as you've kind of explained.
Yeah.
So I'll just take a couple of questions from the very discerning audience here. And let's see. Mr. Shankar, thank you so much for your contribution. He says, once Pashtun Taliban are done with Pakistan, which states that eventually they will be, what are the chances they come for us?
You see, you must understand, Pashtuns we have a civilizational link with the Pashtuns. People tend to forget Chandragupta Maurya, Ashoka, the Buddhist influence, the Hindu Shahi kingdoms of Kabul, the Buddhist rulers in Bamiyan, all have huge civilizational links with India. Then you've had three Afghan dynasties, Pashtun dynasties ruling the Sultanate. You had the Khiljis, you had the Lodhis, you had the Suris. Afterwards, even principalities, Bhopal, for example, or Tonk, Farrukhabad, all these places still have Pashtuns, Pashtun origins. That is one aspect, the civilizational links of the people-to-people contact that we've had through the centuries with the Pashtuns. And second, the Taliban don't have a pan-Afghanistan agenda. That's the difference with the Al-Qaeda and with the Islamic State. The Islamic State and Al-Qaeda say that you are not true jihadis because you are limited, whereas we are looking at a caliphate which is which doesn't believe in territories, which have the whole wide world the wide world is ours. And Taliban has said nothing doing. Our focus is Afghanistan. The TTP says our focus is the tribal areas, at best Pakistan. We are not going out anywhere to expand. Yes, there will be the stray people, mercenaries, who Pakistan thinks that they can recruit and send off to India. But I think Pakistan itself has been taught a lesson that if you strike once, we're going to strike you where it really hurts, whether it's Balakot, we're going to enter your home under this government and going to hit you there. So Pakistan will think 10 times before they want to push any terrorist, let alone a Afghan or a Taliban or a Pashtun, into India.
So I have Abhishek who's written a longish comment, but I'll just kind of surmise it. He's talked about the Maratha wars with the Afghans and all that stuff. Now, I think I'll just surmise what he says. How do the Pashtuns actually look at the Indian armies that went across there? And I'm talking about ancient times. The Marathas, Ranjit Singh.
Ahmad Shah Durrani, Ahmad Shah Durrani had invaded India.
Yeah.
Third Battle of Panipat, where he defeated the Marathas.
So how do they kind of put that into context for themselves?
You mean the past historical experience?
Yes, sir.
You see, they have great reverence for Ahmad Shah because he's considered the father of Afghanistan. He's the one who built the Afghan state in 1747 when it was set up. They also realized at that time the only business model was loot and plunder and invasion. What Ahmad Shah did was he invaded India, defeated the Marathas, looted, but went back. He restored the Mughals to the throne. He didn't annex Delhi to the Pashtun empire because he knew he could not hold on to it. So there is this. So therefore, you will find that even historically how it happened that the Pashtuns in NWFP, the Muslim League had no traction there because for the Pashtuns, the Muslims of India, they had memories of the Pashtun Mughal clash. They didn't have very happy memories of that. And the Muslims in India felt that Durrani had come and destroyed the Mughal Empire. So Muslim League had no traction. Therefore, in the 1946 elections, the Congress defeated the Muslim League and formed the government.
Yeah. Again,
harking back to the historical experience. So I don't think so. The Pashtuns have any sort of animosity or hatred. As I mentioned, the civilizational links, and especially in the coming to more modern times, the kind of developmental work that India has done across the board in Afghanistan, $3 billion of investments. There's a great regard for India and what India represents and the Indian people.
These are just two comments that I'm putting from a very, very regular viewer of mine, sir. Venki says, New Year's greetings to Shri Devesharji. And as a coincidence, this morning I saw the interview of Dr. Sohail Khan detailing the injustices done to Khan and
Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan.
Yes, sir. And the 1948 Babur massacre. So this is just a comment. He also says that he will buy your book and learn more about this seismic fault now in the open and widening with each passing day.
Thank you. You see about Ghaffar Khan. Sorry, go ahead.
Please, sir.
You see, Ghaffar Khan is a tragic story as far as the partition of India came. You see, he was a staunch supporter of Gandhiji and the Congress. For 20 years, they fought together after the Kamagat Muddal joined the Congress in the 1930s. But when it came to partition in 1947, for whatever reason, there are historical reasons, I don't want to comment on that. The fact was that the Congress agreed to holding a referendum, Mountbatten's proposal to hold a referendum in NWFP, even though they had won the elections in 1946. The British wanted, in their mindset, they were Muslim Pakistan and Hindu India. They could not understand how a province with 96% Muslim population could have voted for the Congress party, which they considered a Hindu party, in 1946. In fact, so much so that Lord Ismay, who was Mountbatten's chief of staff, called it a bastard situation where a majority Muslim province had voted for the Congress. And they realized that if Pakistan was to be viable, as I mentioned earlier, this province had to come within the Muslim Pakistan portion rather than the Hindu Indian portion. So therefore, this referendum was decided, and the Congress party accepted it. That is when Ghaffar Khan told Gandhiji, "You have thrown us to the wolves. That you have betrayed us at the moment when India was becoming free." So then they went and they boycotted the referendum, and so Muslim League won hands down, and so on and so forth. So that was an injustice. In fact, later on, even this is Indira Gandhi, the former Prime Minister, in the foreword to one of the books on Ghaffar Khan, said that, "I hope in your largeness of your heart you will forgive us." And Vinoba Bhave also. Lots of people realized that what had been done to Ghaffar Khan was extremely unfair at the stroke of independence. And then Jinnah immediately dismissed the Khudai Khidmat government within a week of Pakistan's creation, because for him there were only two nationalities, Hindus and Muslims. He could not accept a Pashtun ethnic nationality. So the government was dismissed, even though Ghaffar Khan and his brothers swore allegiance to the state of Pakistan. And the chief minister, who was Abdul Qayyum, I think his name was. So the Khudai Khidmat had got together at a place called this Babra, which he had mentioned. And the police just opened fire. It was like a Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Even though the women were carrying Quran on their chest, they shot the bullets. The bullets pierced the Quran and things like that. So it was a very brutal way of putting down the Khudai Khidmat.
Thanks for Venki sir. I'd really like to thank you. I think the referendum was always a big question, but I think this particular comment brought out a lot of clarity. Thank you so much. I'd like to ask you another two questions. Sir, is Pashtunwali a more regressive code than the Sharia? Just an opinion.
See, again, you can't put a value judgment on this. Pashtunwali predates Islam, right? It has been the code which has protected the Pashtuns, allowed them to continue to be an independent people for centuries. They trace their lineage, the Pashtuns trace their lineage to the conversion of their common ancestor, their belief, Qais bin Rashid, who went to meet the Prophet in 622, was converted by the Prophet to Islam, came back and spread the religion. But Pashtunwali predates that, the famous comment of Ali Khan, that I've been a Pashtun for 4,000 years, a Musalman for 1,400 or 1,200, and a Pakistani just for 40. So for them, the ethnicity, Pashtunwali, is far more important and longer. So it is the traditional local priest, the local mullah, who has blended and removed the contradictions between Islam and Sharia. This is what happened throughout the centuries. But now Islam has got exaggerated because of the Wahhabi Salafi influence coming into these areas as a result of the Soviet invasion and setting up of madrasas with Saudi funding. So the Deobandi Sufi impulses of the Pashtuns have got strongly influenced by the Wahhabi Salafi influences. And therefore you find that Sharia will then start predominating in many areas. Just one thing, if I can just, for your viewers,
Please, sir.
People don't realize that the Pashtun areas were a very strong center of Sufi culture. In fact, places like Kandahar, Herat, Balkh, Peshawar, Kabul were very strong centers of Sufi culture. Herat used to be called, or is called, Khak-e-Auliya, the soil of Sufi saints. Ghazni is called Jai-e-Auliya, the abode of Sufi saints. The most popular Sufi shrine in Pakistan today is Data Darbar in Lahore. There's a Pashtun Al-Hajweri, who came from Ghazni in the 11th century. He's buried there. He was called Data Sahib, the giver of blessings. That is the most popular shrine in Pakistan, and in the Pashtun. Ahmad Shah Durrani was strongly influenced by Naqshbandi. Even Mullah Omar, he was taught by a Sufi scholar, Haji Baba. And Mullah Omar, who started the Taliban, the Amir of the Taliban, he used to visit the grave of Haji Baba every week. And this was a major dispute with the Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda said, this is shirk, this is polytheism. You can't go and visit graves. And he said nothing of the sort, So that was a strong Sufi influence. You'll find people going to wearing taweez, interceding, asking for their Sufi to intercede for, to seek favors from Allah and so on. So it has been a very, we forget this because of the terrorism and because of the violence, but it has been a very strong center of Sufi culture.
My God, I mean that's a revelation. Uh, Interesting. The last question, sir, I'd like to ask you, how's the relationship between the Pashtuns and the Jaish or the LET, given the fact that the latter two are Punjabi military makeup?
So it is Pakistan that has airdropped Lashkar and Jaish, into to seek sanctuaries in the ungoverned spaces in the in Afghanistan. And he's right; they are Punjabis. Largely, they are Punjabis. So Taliban just tolerate them because they need the assistance and help of Pakistan. The Taliban also realize that if they are going to get help from the Americans, they'll have to make sure that the activities of Al Qaeda and the ISKP are limited. And if they're going to have a serious relationship with India, they will have to curb the activities of the Lashkar and the Jaish. But because today it is a tactical need that they have
Hmm.
of not antagonizing Pakistan, so these people are there. They are definitely there. There's no question about that.
They will try and
But
balance
it's a
both.
it's a tactical lead. But I don't think so. Whether the Taliban themselves are strong enough, to take on so many terrorist groups at the same time.
Sir, just a closing question, sir. Any further fault lines that we should be aware of in Pakistan that are brewing up? And of course, before I let you answer that question, I must say, this particular session is amongst a lot of people watching in and who will watch, including me, has brought in a certain inquisitiveness with regards to actually ask you to join us once again to talk about the factor of India's connection with Pashtuns post, I would say post 1900, the modern connection in the 20th century, where the Indian independence movement started and the interaction with Gandhi and the Indian leaders and stuff like that. So that we'll discuss on a certain other day. But right now, to close this wonderful discussion, sir, any other fault line that we need to be watching out in Pakistan?
You'll have to wait for my next book.
Anshuman, I think you got your answer. He was asking a question on that, sir. So, but I'd really request if we could actually, sometime in the future, talk about, because the part of the referendum has honestly lit a fire in my head, and I really want to kind of get into a little more depth. And I believe one thing for a fact, that there's no one I've heard you speak, and a lot of the people who are watching have heard you speak on the matter, and you're quite a authoritative figure in terms of their history and stuff like that. So it'll be great to learn this from you. But so before anything else, this has been fantastic. There is It's a great start to a wonderful new year when we get a certain knowledge, a certain set of knowledge of our very friendly neighbor, as I like to call it all the time, and its very friendly neighbor on the other side. The Pashtuns have always been a mystery with regards to their code, anything, and the code of Badal is something that I've quoted many times in my conversations with various different people. But the way you've kind of put it across makes a lot of sense as to what the game is. And of course, a lot of people around the world need to be careful with regards to the Badal that will come their way. Not today, but sometime in the future. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Thank you, Adi. Thank you for having me over, especially on a New Year's Day. It's great to share whatever little study. I'm a student. I'm still studying, and I find that not that I am suffering from a Stockholm syndrome, but the Pashtuns, not much is known about them. Certainly not in India. We just have a fixated mind, and whatever is coming to us is coming through us through Western sources.
Yeah.
The British fought for them with 100 years. The Americans have been fighting with them. So there are no Pashtun sources, no Pashtun narratives, counter narratives, in fact. So the image of the Pashtun that the British built, of a ferocious fighter, always at war with each other, and so on and so forth, there has been no contestations. And so I find this is, very one-sided. Let's at least get to know them a little bit better. And you mentioned about the Indian connection. Instead of 1900, if you really want to do a session, we should do a session even earlier.
Let's do that.
Start from the Buddhist influences, start from Chandragupta Maurya, and the Hindu Shai kingdoms of Kabul, the Buddhist kingdoms in Bamiyan, because that is the real civilizational connect that we have with the Pashtuns. You talk about Gandhari, Gandhari in Mahabharata, you know. So, it goes back millennia.
Yeah, millennia.
So, we
I'd
need to
love to,
talk.
sir. I'm open. As a matter of fact, this will be a learning journey for us, for us at Dev Talks to kind of this thing. And I'd love to connect with you in the next week sometime to get a little headway on what research I should do to prepare the questions to put across someone like you. It'll be interesting to kind of set this session up. Guys, stay tuned for something like this coming up in the next some time. We will be sure to address this issue, and I'll try and get Sir to come back and give us the history so that we understand this game a little better. We normally look at it from a today's perspective, but a people that go back in history and behave according to what they went through in history, I think history will be one of the most important things for us to understand to deal with them in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much,
having
sir.
me over. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir, and Jai Hind.
Yeah.